Hey there, what if I told you that you could write a recipe, not for a cake, but for a computer? It sounds kind of crazy, right? But today, we're going to break down the absolute basics of programming with Python, and you'll see it's a lot more like cooking than you think.
Seriously, that's all programming really is at its heart. It's just writing a simple, super clear recipe that a computer, who is, let's be honest, a very literal-minded chef, can follow perfectly, every single time, no questions asked.
And for us today, Python is going to be our recipe book. It's the language we'll use to write down our instructions so clearly that the computer knows exactly what we want it to do.
You know how every great recipe starts with laying out your ingredients? You gotta know what you're working with before you start mixing things up. Well, in programming, it's the exact same idea. Our ingredients are just different pieces of information.
So, first things first, we need a place to put these ingredients. In Python, we call this a variable. The best way to think of it is just like a labeled jar in your pantry. It holds on to some information, and you give it a name so you can find it again later. Simple.
And check out how easy this is. We just created a jar, we labeled it name, and we put the word mama inside. That's it. Seriously, you've just officially created your first variable.
Now, of course, there are a few simple rules for labeling these jars, just to keep things from getting confusing. The name can't start with a number. It's always a good idea to use a name that actually describes what's inside, and you've got to be precise. A jar labeled age with a lowercase a is totally different from one labeled age with a capital A.
Okay, so we've got our jars all ready to go. But what kind of ingredients can we actually put inside them? Can we just toss anything in there? Well, not exactly.
Our ingredients really come in a few main types. We have whole numbers, which programmers call integers, or int for short. Then you've got your numbers with decimals. Those are called floats. Any kind of text is called a string, or str. And finally, you have a simple yes or no switch, which is called a boolean, or bool, and it can only be true or false. All right, so we've got our ingredients sorted and neatly labeled. But a recipe isn't much good if the chef, our computer, can't communicate with us, right? So let's see how that works. Whenever we want the computer to show us something, like the finished cake, or even just a quick message, we use the print command. It's the computer's way of talking back to us. And print, hello world, is the classic, the famous first thing pretty much every programmer learns to cook. And what if the computer needs an ingredient from us during the recipe? That's where input comes in. This command basically pauses the whole operation and asks the user for a piece of information, which we can then grab and store in one of our variable jars.
Okay, we've got our ingredients. We've got a way to talk to our chef. Now, it's time for the real action, the step-by-step cooking instructions.
Think of operators as the verbs in our recipe. Add this, subtract that, mix, divide. They're the actions we perform on our ingredients. For example, we can just tell the computer to add 10 and 5, and then print the result so we can see it.
And this is where programming gets really, really powerful. A good recipe has decision points, doesn't it? Like, if the batter seems too thick, add a splash of milk. Well, our computer can do that too.
And here's how that logic works. It's super simple. We ask a question. We check a condition. Is the number in our age jar 18 or bigger? If the answer is true, the computer follows one set of instructions. If it's false, it does something else entirely. It's like a fork in the road for our recipe.
The best chefs don't do everything by hand, one tedious step at a time. They have shortcuts and clever techniques to be more efficient. And guess what? Programmers do too.
Sometimes a recipe says whisk the eggs exactly 10 times. For something like that, where you know the exact number of repeats, we use a for loop. But other times, a recipe says stir the sauce until it's smooth. You don't know how many stirs that'll take, you just keep going until a condition is met. For that, we use a while loop.
Now think about this. What if you have a set of steps you use all the time, like making a basic vinaigrette? You wouldn't write out the entire recipe for it every single time you needed it in a bigger dish. You just say, make the vinaigrette. In programming, we call that a function. It's a reusable mini recipe.
And the way you do it is just as simple as the idea. You define your mini recipe once. Here, we've called it greet, and from that point on, anytime you need to say hello, you just call its name. It's an absolutely amazing way to save time and keep your main recipe neat and tidy.
So, we've got our ingredients, our instructions, and our awesome shortcuts. The final piece of the puzzle is just good old-fashioned organization, just like a well-stocked pantry. What if you have a bunch of related ingredients, like all your different spices or maybe a shopping list? You wouldn't want a separate labeled jar for every single one. That would be chaos. Instead, you'd use a spice rack or a single sheet of paper. In Python, that's called a list. It's one variable that holds a whole bunch of items all in one place, in order.
And to get a specific item from our list, we just ask for its position. But here's the one quirky thing you've got to remember. In the world of programming, we always start counting from 0. So the first item on the list is actually at position 0. It's a little weird, but you get used to it fast.
And that's really it. Variables, data types, logic, loops, functions, and lists. Believe it or not, with just these simple concepts, these basic kitchen tools, you have the fundamental building blocks to create almost any program, any recipe you can possibly imagine.
From here, the possibilities are literally endless. Every single complex app or website you've ever used is just built from these simple ideas, all combined in creative ways. So, the only real question left is, what are you going to cook up first?